Hi everyone, I'm Jessica and I go by Stitching Colours here on YouTube. Today I thought I would just show you a quick little video of how I stitch. So today I am working on Wizard Septimus, charted by Heaven and Earth Designs, based on the artwork by Jan Patrik Krasny. So this is stitched 25 count 1/1 with CXC threads, which are all on these homemade thread cards. The threads seem to be in a little bit of a tangle at the moment, but a little bit of care with them will straighten it all up. It's just because they've all been bagged up. Something that has changed for me since I kitted this one up is that I only put one skein on the thread drops at a time, even for something like 310, which might have, and this piece has 27,000 stitches left. Another tip I find is I always lose my scissors. So I have a ribbon around the handles and around there so I can still open them, and then I tuck them over my head. So while I'm stitching, I never lose them. I seem to always work with a 28 tapestry needle, and that's regardless of whether I'm using one strand on 25 count over 1 or 2/2 on 28 or 32 count. These are John James ones. I bought 1,000 of them, and they are just the silver ones, and I've had really good results with them. So currently on Wizard Septimus, I am at 3.88%, and that is 14,479 stitches. And I have Pattern Keeper, which most of you'll know, to see my pattern. So when I started cross stitching, I started using cross country, and then I discovered parking and experimented a little bit with parking before deciding it didn't really work for me. Then I went back to cross country with some variations on parking. Again, it didn't work for me because it was too illogical in that when I parked my threads, I would go to find that thread and find it's not in a useful spot for where I am now. So I've kind of worked out a way that works for me, in that I park in the bottom left-hand corner of the top left-hand stitch of that colour. So here you've got 310, which is parked, and 939, and it looks to be the same kind of situation in the next box because it came from the row above, and when I started over here this morning, I didn't realise. So when I start stitching a new box, I start from the bottommost parked thread because there's no stitches. If a thread was parked here, there would be no stitches of that colour above in the box. So I can just go through, finish that colour, and then go park it in the next box or the next row if it appears in the next row of boxes. Once I'm finished all of my parked threads, if there's any new colours that I don't already have all in that box parked ready to go, then I will start them, but I'll start from the top left hand side, working my way through each of those colours. I find it works really well for me because I'm not crossing over the back of where threads are parked in front, and seems to end up with a better way. So once I get this sorted, those first few stitches, and I've actually found that stitching while talking is not the easiest to do, but I stitch using the sewing method, and I stitch in hand, which is a little different, especially compared to most people who stitching on these big pieces seem to use a frame or hoops or Q-snaps of sorts. So this is a little bit awkward because I don't normally have threads parked in the box to the right of where I'm going. They're normally all, well, at least if they're right up to this edge, I normally will stitch those threads in before I park them. So just bear with me when I get close again to those stitches in the next row or two. So when I'm doing this, I'll either, depending on how I go and how many stitches are in that row, I'll choose 1, 2, or even possibly 3 stitches, or 3 rows I should say, and just go through. So I have to be a little more careful when dealing with stitches that are directly below a parked thread, but by holding it with my thumb above, I don't have too many issues. That allows the tension so it's not going to get caught up in what's going on. So this next row, I've got that relatively big gap in the middle. So what I'm going to do is stitch 3 rows across at a time. And I have to say, stitching while talking makes me a little more clumsy than normal. I guess I'm not used to having to think about 2 different things all at once. So yeah, I don't normally have quite so many issues finding the right hole to stick the needle up through. Okay, and then that one goes down to there. I really like the CXC thread, especially on this piece, which is a lot darker, especially up at the top in the sky. And that's all I've gotten stitched so far. But it's, because the coverage is slightly better, it means that I don't have any fabric showing through. And I'm really having issues with this one. There. I don't have any fabric showing through behind these dark colours. I know a lot of the times when you're doing DMC, it can show through a bit. And that one as well. There. So yeah, nope, let's do that. I have to admit, I have recorded these, a few videos like this before, and struggled because the angle wasn't quite right to show the actual fabric, or the camera was in the way, and I couldn't actually stitch very well. So this seems to be working a little better, but I don't know how good it looks on camera. So we'll have to see. You'll have to let me know if I need to be closer, more zoomed in or anything on the fabric. It's just a little bit harder to do when stitching in hand. Again, I don't normally have that issue, but I'm too busy thinking about what I want to say. So those are those 3 rows all stitched. Something else I do when I'm stitching is, because I'm paranoid about getting lines in my finished piece, I feather in a little bit every now and again into the next box. And don't tend to just do straight lines right across, especially when I get closer to the bottom of the box. I kind of do some more vertical rows and filling in areas. So I haven't had any issues with lines as yet in any of my pieces, but it's still one of those things I'm paranoid about because of the large amount of time that we all invest in stitching these pieces. It would be devastating to get partway through or even finish it and then realise there's a big line right through the middle. Some of those lines seem to come out from what I've seen, but not all of them. It's one of the reasons I love Easy Guide fabric, because I have seen people's lines that have been left after pulling out their sulky grid lines. I mean, going to all the effort of stitching them in the first place and then having them leave lines would be just as devastating. Again, some of those things wash out, but not all the time. So I am nearly at the end of this box. Well, the bottom of this box with this colour. There's not that many more stitches of this colour in this box, but at the same time this section seems to be predominantly 939 and 310. We are up in the sky. It's moved away from where I guess it's planets or stars or something. Possibly could be the magic from the staff, which is down here, but that was from when I was started still doing cross country. You can see the kind of the ridges on the staff down here. So yeah, I definitely prefer going page by page and parking more now. I feel like I've discovered the way I like to stitch. I don't like going back and filling in those 1s and 2s of stitches, the confetti at the end. I just kept getting further and further away from where I actually wanted to be filling stitches in, which is why I tried to go with parking and other things like that, because I thought it might be a better fit. And it turns out it was, once I watched a few videos and made a few adjustments myself in how I did it and made it more logical. I think some of the reason that I struggled even with the idea of parking in the first place was the thought of lines because of tension, but there doesn't seem to be any issues so far. I also had issues, especially at the beginning, with finding that any parked threads got into a tangled mess, but I've got ways of dealing with that now. And recently I ordered, well, I should say recently they arrived, some more sewing bobbins and some thread curls, or I think this is called spool huggers, is their actual official name. And they're the little rubber things that some people put around their thread, their Q-snaps. But I found they're much more useful just tucking them in the bobbin. So it looks like I'm running out of thread for this colour, but there is a parked thread of this colour in the next box, so I'll probably just go borrow that one for lack of a better word. My life is pretty boring. I don't have all that much to chat about because I work full-time, and as a hazmat consultant I could talk probably for hours about asbestos, meth contamination, mould and other services we offer, but that wouldn't help all that much, and I'm sure it would bore you all out of your mind. Okay, I am nearly at the end of this thread. I want to finish this stitch and then I'll darn it out. I really seem to like playing thread chicken at the moment. I don't know why. Okay, so there we go. And as I showed before, I did not have any issues finding my scissors. So for now, because of finishing the last stitch and this having had a parked thread of this colour, the same 939, I'm just going to grab it and bring it down here to finish out the last 4 stitches, or 5. There might be a few more. Nope. Why are you doing that, little needle? There we go. So I was pretty stubborn when I started cross stitching. I first started storing all my threads in little snap lock bags on a keyring carabiner kind of thing, and I stuck to that for quite some time. When Mum started, not that long later, after buying kits of her own from China, she started with bobbins because she didn't want to have to open and shut the Ziploc bags all the time. eventually I could kind of see her point, and I went over to Bobbins as well. It probably wasn't that much longer after that she discovered Annie's Keepers and thread drops and things like that. And I was pretty stubborn staying on Bobbins for quite some time until it must have been a combined birthday and Christmas present. She bought me the kit for the Snow Queen Mirabilia. And so that had all of the beads and the called for fabric and everything. Actually, it might not have had the fabric. I think I ordered the fabric myself from 123 Stitch. And she gave me some thread drops, or a packet of thread drops at the time. And I went, okay, I'm going to humour you and I'll give it a try. I don't like the thought of it because it just seems so messy. So I tried the first one, did a few hundred stitches on it and went, why am I dealing with bobbins? These are so much easier. I don't have to go and wind my my thread back onto the bobbins. So I went on to 123 Stitch and bought about 30 packets of the thread drops. These are the cardboard ones. So I stuck to those for quite some time before moving on and buying some Annie's Keepers, and then buying cards to make my own thread drops, and that kind of got quite frustrating because you had to have thick enough card for them to be strong enough and not be too flimsy that they'd just tear as soon as she tried to pull a thread off them. But yet, the stronger and thicker the card was that you used, it meant that they were harder to punch out the holes that were needed. So then I gave playing cards a go earlier this year and found they weren't all that useful. I've got them with my Gecko Rouge Cat number 4 pattern, and the problem I had with it is that they tear quite easily. I guess you've affected the structural integrity of them when you put holes in them to put your threads through, so it kind of hasn't ended well. I think one of my Christmas pieces is on cards as well, so it'll probably get moved over next time I work on it. But now I bought a 3D printer to try and make thread drops, as I mentioned in my last update, and there's a lot of adjustments to make, and it's a very steep learning curve to get them properly printing and everything like that. However, they are coming along and I'm getting there. So my next start will probably be on my own homemade thread drops that I've printed. So that's very exciting. And makes me want to have a new start shortly. It's a good thing I've got one in December the 1st. This week, while I've been stitching, I have finished my Kingdom of Books by Adriana, which I bought the kit off mybobbin.com, and it came to the back stitching and I kind of made it up as I went along. I wasn't convinced on having book titles on the books for some reason, even regardless of whether they were in English or a different language. So in the end, I decided to just kind of make up my own back stitching and do what I felt I wanted. I had a few little issues because I wanted the flags to stand out behind the books in the middle. But no matter how I did the back stitching, it didn't seem to turn out very well. And the original version didn't have any back stitching really on those flags either. So I guess I just have to deal with it and accept what I made up. So yeah. Anyway, I guess I will leave it at this. So thank you for watching, and I hope you all have a lovely weekend, and I hope you're having some nicer weather than we are at the moment. It's kind of a bit wet and miserable. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you next weekend.